Hi everyone, and welcome to Unpacking the Book of Mormon. My name is Caleb, and this I think is episode 16. If you haven't been following along, we're going through the Book of Mormon chapter by chapter each day, and this is kind of a chance, I guess, to do scripture study together, to go through the Book of Mormon together. It's for those of you who haven't got a copy as well. If you want to interested in seeing what it's about, you can go through and see the stuff it contains. Now, and kind of I guess have someone there to walk you through it as well and point out things. I think there's a great power in studying the scriptures together, and so if you have any insights as well of things that pop up and that questions, like feel free to throw them in the comments below, and it can be more of a discussion and things like that as well. I didn't bring up the map. Okay. Well, if we go Google, Nephi's journey, images, go. That looks like a pretty good one. Here we go. So we have they started in Jerusalem, so it's a family. We're in the first book of Nephi. Nephi is kind of the first prophet. His father Lehi was also a prophet, and he's kind of the head of the family. But by now, about 8 to 10 years have passed in the Book of Mormon, and it's excuse me. And Nephi is more of a grown up and is sort of in some ways the spiritual leader of the family. So they came down from Jerusalem. The Valley of Lemuel is a pretty good valley that they've got there. I don't remember the name. They followed in a south-southeast direction down in the most fertile parts in the borders of the Red Sea to a land that was called Nahum. There's an exact place here that we talked about it a bit yesterday and stuff. There's a specific place there that had a temple and burial grounds and stuff where they buried Ishmael. Then they went nearly perfectly eastward direction and had babies and stuff, and it took several years. They went really slowly through the desert, but the Lord provided for them, and they ended up in this spot in modern-day Oman, where there's a few nice little beachy, foresty nooks that are like just brimming with wildlife and stuff. Despite all of this desert, there's a few of these beautiful beachy nooks, and they found one of these beautiful places they called Bountiful right here, and they called the waters herein because there were many waters and it was huge. So even here near the Red Sea, there's still like waters at its widest part. It's maybe it's still possible. I don't know if you could see the other side at all. I don't know how high the elevation is there, but either way, this is what they've come here. And they're in this land, and we had yesterday that God commanded Nephi to build a ship. And his brothers murmured, and he spoke harshly to his brothers and stuff, and then they humbled themselves and were willing to sort of help him. Now, let's and this is I might as well go on these points as well since I've got the images here. But we talked at the very end of the video yesterday about the idea that because it is widely assumed by Latter-day Saints that all the Polynesians who, in their own oral histories, are descendants of one single ancestor, great voyager who came across into the oceans and stuff in the boat. That he was a character in the Book of Mormon called Hagoth, who he and some people took some ships and sailed off exploring into the West Sea, it said. And so that's sort of assumed or taken to be um, the main character there, and it said specifically that they build their ships after the manner of Nephi's ship, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that. I believe there's this idea that they built ships after the manner of they did a number of things. They fashioned swords after the sword of Laban, and things like that. And there's a few inferences that they did things after this tradition, and we know that the Lord told Nephi, you're gonna build this ship after the manner that I tell you, not after the manner of men. And if you look at all Polynesian ships, they're these two hull ships, or they're outriggers. They're a lot more stable in the turbulent, like big sea water and stuff like that. And you had some quite big ones. They had little outrigger ones, but they had some quite big ones that had masts and sails. I guess if you've seen Moana and stuff, these are pretty accurate representations. Like, look at the size of that ship. If you're saying that, like, if she's this, like, sure, and they've even got like a hut, a little sheltered place there. It's got two huge masts and stuff. Like, of course, a ship this size could easily take a family of 30 or something people across the ocean, and swiftly too. Okay, so let's dig into chapter 18 here. And so this kind of continues, it's a little unclear, it kind of continues directly on from the end of yesterday's chapter. And so after this time, they humbled themselves before the Lord, and they knew that it was by the power of the Lord, and they wanted to worship Nephi. And he said, no, worship the Lord your God, and honor thy father and mother, that days may be long in the land which the Lord thy God shall give thee. And then it continues directly on, and it came to pass that they did worship the Lord. Yay! And remember, because the whole book was originally not divided in chapters, they were done afterwards for study purposes, ease of study and referencing and stuff like that, chapters and verses. And it came to pass that they did worship the Lord, and did go forth with me, and we did work timbers, curious workmanship. And the Lord did show me from time to time after what manner I should work the timbers of the ship. Now I, Nephi, did not work the timbers after the manner which was learned by men, neither did I build the ship after the manner of men, but I did build it after the manner which the Lord had shown unto me. Wherefore it was not after the manner of men. It's worth noting that modern day speed sailing is done with this double hull design, or something. They slice through water like a knife or something, and they're very stable. And so it just works really well with that concept that it was a curious and not after the manner of men. And I, Nephi, did go into the mount often, and I did pray often unto the Lord. Wherefore the Lord showed unto me great things. And I like that he doesn't embellish more on that. That could have been more about the ship. It could have been more about like just the physics and science of the way the world works in terms of like navigating a boat and how to sail stuff, and like it could be just a lot more other great things. He's already seen tremendous knowledge, had tremendous knowledge in things and revelations and visions of the future and stuff that we've seen. And it came to pass that after I had finished the ship according to the work of the Lord, and now we can assume that this took like a couple of years maybe. We know it took them 8 years before they got from leaving Jerusalem by the time they got to Bountiful, and then we know it's because of another timestamp sort of later that it was 4 years after that point that they arrived in the Promised Land. So, or maybe that was when Lehi died. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure, but basically, this is like potentially another couple of years has occurred here. It might be like 589 BC or something at this point. And we finished the ship according to the word of the Lord. My brethren beheld that it was good, and that the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine. So wherefore they did humble themselves again before the Lord. So, like, after, like, they didn't believe they could do it, but they humbled themselves because God spoke harsh words to them and shocked them and stuff, and they humbled themselves to the Lord, and then when it was done, they were like, okay, yeah, no, you're right. It's they were humbled, and again, so but if we're talking over a couple of years here, it's a big thing that happened slowly, and it probably seemed for a long time like it was just a fool's errand. And so by the time it's finally done, if you've ever done a huge monumental project that's taken a couple of years of consistent effort or something, it's really, really gratifying to see it done. And so they humble themselves before the Lord, because they understood there's no way this their whole argument for not wanting to work in the first place was that, like, Nephi doesn't know how to build a ship, but they're shown here that through the Lord they could do anything. And it came to pass that the voice of the Lord came unto my father, who is the patriarch of the family, that we should arise and go down into the ship. And it came to pass that on the morrow, after we had prepared all things, much fruits and meat from the wilderness, and honey in abundance, and provisions according to that which the Lord had commanded us, we did go down into the ship with all our loading, and our seeds, and whatsoever thing we had brought with us, every one according to his age. Wherefore we did all go down into the ship with our wives and our children. It's interesting they went down into the ship, but again, it depends on where exactly they were camped, because we saw in some of those images of, like, the Omani coast of Oman there, where Bountiful is, that there are lots of kind of steep hills and things there. So the idea that they went down into the ship, like, it's not necessarily reflective of they went inside the hull of a boat as we know it. They went down into the ocean, into their ship or something, but like onto their ship. And now my father had begat 2 sons in the wilderness, with the elder which was called Jacob, and the younger Joseph. So in their old age-ish, like, again, we don't know the exact age or something, but Lehi was presumably somewhere between 45 and 70, I don't know. And the mother was obviously young enough, like that. So sometime in the wilderness there, so after Nephi is probably like 14 or older or something, she was still able to give birth to 2 children, Jacob and Joseph, or 2 sons. It doesn't say if there were any other daughters or anything like that. And it came to pass, after we had all gone down into the ship, and had taken with us our provisions and things which had been commanded us, we did put forth into the sea, and were driven forth before the wind towards the promised land. Now, again, I usually prepare these sorts of things beforehand. Now, this one, so there's, as you can see here, there's a number of different potential routes here. Someone's saying they're going right along the coast here, and then went over here into Central America. There's been, so this one is interesting. They say Lehi's family went here. Some people say went down here, like going that way. But again, if we follow the Heartland model, which I think is the most, according to the evidence, evidences that are there archaeologically speaking and from the scriptures itself and things, I think it's a much more viable model. If you look at like along the lines and stuff here, like Jerusalem, here, like the seeds and things, like sure, the seeds they took from here, but they also took provisions from Jerusalem and stuff. So, like, it is technically tropical or subtropical. It's all sort of with, like, according to the Heartland model, the people of the Hopewell, the first Hopewell ruins, date to this bottom part of Florida here from around 550 BC, which falls almost exactly into our timeline perfectly. And so this again, they plan, and we haven't got there yet or anything, but there's some people who say went down here and were pushed along by the winds naturally, quite easily. That would happen right along here and stuff. I think though, because of the Heartland model, if they did land here, that the route would have been to go around Africa here and then over this way here. Now I don't know. I don't know much about like the currents and the winds on the ocean here, how viable that is. But it is notable that there is a part after they've been traveling for many days where there is a huge storm for about 4 days, and they were blown backwards. The waters are fighting against them in the direction they wanted to go. And whether that is down here, because as I understand it, most of the currents around the bottom of the Antarctica flow in a this way direction. That might have, I assume, again, and this is me speaking totally from conjecture as I understand things. I could be completely wrong, and there are people who are much more knowledgeable probably about this stuff than I am. But I think if it came down here or something and the currents were fighting here, this is possibly would have been storms here. But again, I don't know enough about the currents and things to kind of say that with any authority. It's something that I want to look into more personally myself. But that would be my, I guess, supposed route there. So let's jump back into the scriptures there. Okay, and behold, and so they were driven forth before the wind towards the promised land. And after we've been driven forth before the wind for the space of many days, behold, my brethren and the sons of Ishmael and also their wives began to make themselves merry. Insomuch that they began to dance and to sing and to speak with much rudeness. Okay, so dancing and singing is praised several times in the scriptures as a good form of like worship, and it's a good wholesome activity that to be done together and things. So it says like sing and dance unto the Lord and stuff like that. So obviously that in itself is not a bad thing, but when they begin to make themselves merry, there's an indication that they might have been getting drunk, and to speak with much rudeness kind of builds on that. Not as they might have been drunk, they might not have been, but they got into quite a almost drunken state, and they might have just been like, yeah, I don't know, YOLO, living life or something like that. But yea, even that they did forget by what power they had been brought thither there. So they forgot by what power they had been brought to the point where they were already. Yea, they were lifted up unto exceeding rudeness. So they were more than just rude, more than just much rude, they were exceeding rude. And now I, Nephi, began to fear exceedingly, lest the Lord should be angry with us and smite us because of our iniquity, that we should be swallowed up in the depths of the sea. Wherefore I, Nephi, began to speak to them with much soberness. So I spoke to them quite soberly. It's interesting that soberness is used in contrast to their merriness. But behold, they were angry with me, saying, we will not that our younger brother should be a ruler over us. And it came to pass that Laman and Lemuel to take me and bind me with cords or ropes, I assume. I don't know if there's just a difference between cords and ropes here. And they did treat me with much harshness. Nevertheless, the Lord did suffer it, that he might show forth his power unto the fulfilling of his word, which he had spoken concerning the wicked. So that's an interesting phrase there. Like, they treated him with much harshness. Nevertheless, the Lord did suffer it. So there's sort of an indication there that he may have prayed similarly as we know he did like 10 years earlier or something when they tied him up in the wilderness a few chapters ago. And they tied him up and he prayed to the Lord to have strength to break the bounds. The Lord just loosed the bounds off him. And something might have been done similar here, but it's interesting that this is a very, and you see this point several times in the scriptures where someone with true faith understands that the Lord allows sufferings to happen so that his judgment might be just. When he knows that he allows people with not even evil intentions necessarily, but people who continually choose to do the wrong thing and choose to do the selfish thing and to willfully sort of hurt others. He allows that to happen. One of the big reasons he allows that to happen is that he might show forth his power unto the fulfilling of his word that is spoken against the wicked. And one of the things I think that people say when they, one of the reasons that I guess younger people or millennials say or purport that like they see the God in the scriptures and they're like, there's so much like you're either righteous or you're wicked or something like that. The idea of concept of like heaven or hell, or like that some people are going to like suffer and stuff. They're like, that's not very. It comes from, I hope it comes from a good place, but it comes from a place where they're thinking in terms of mercy and not justice. And one of the reasons why the Lord allows wicked people to continue to act wickedly against people who don't deserve that is specifically that he might show forth his justice. And it came to pass that after they had bound me in so much that I could not move, so they bound him so much that he couldn't move, the compass, or Liahona, that we looked at the other day, which had been prepared of the Lord, did cease to work. Wherefore they knew not where they should steer the ship, insomuch that there arose a great storm. So they didn't know where to steer the ship, and they went straight into a huge storm, a great and terrible tempest. And we were driven back upon the waters for the space of 3 days. And they began to be frightened exceedingly, lest they should be drowned in the sea. Nevertheless, they did not loose me. So despite their being exceedingly frightened that they're going to drown, they didn't loose him for 3 days. And on the 4th day, which we had been driven back, the tempest began to be on the 4th day they'd been driven back, the tempest began to be exceedingly sore. So it was exceedingly frightening, now it's exceedingly sore. It's getting worse. And it came to pass that we were about to be swallowed up in the depths of the sea. And after we had been driven back upon the waters for the space of 4 days, my brethren began to see that the judgments of God were upon them. Again, it's justice, straight. And that they must perish, save that they should repent of their iniquities. Wherefore they came unto me and loosed the bands which are upon my wrists. And behold, they had swollen exceedingly. He likes this word exceedingly. And also mine ankles were much swollen, and great was the soreness thereof. Nevertheless, so he's in a lot of pain from being tied up like this for 3 days. 4 days, it's the 4th day. Nevertheless, I did look unto my God. And there's this beautifully interesting symbology here between Nephi being bound for 3 days and Christ dying for 3 days before rising. But nevertheless, I did look unto my God, and I did praise him all the day long, and I did not murmur against the Lord because of mine afflictions. So after suffering that at the hands of his brothers and stuff, he didn't. He wasn't spiteful. He wasn't like, yeah, serves you right, or like, what, you guys are idiots for doing this, or anything like that. He he didn't murmur against the Lord. He looked unto God and praised Him all the day long for his freedom from captivity. That's the mindset that we need to have. It's not the I deserve thing. It's the now my father Lehi had said many things unto them, and also unto the sons of Ishmael. But behold, they did breathe out much. So my father, like when Nephi was set up, he's like Lehi, the patriarch of the family, had said a lot of things unto them and the sons of Ishmael. But behold, they did breathe out much threatenings against anyone that should speak for me. And my parents, being stricken in years and having suffered much grief because of their children, they were brought down, yea, even upon their sick beds. So like they're sick and grieved. And I imagine that the huge storm and the seasickness or something was not helping as well. Because of their grief and much sorrow and the iniquity of my brethren, they were brought near even to be carried out of this time. Excuse me. Oh my goodness, that's so... sorry. They were brought near even to be carried out of this time to meet their God. Yea, their grey hairs were about to be brought down to lie low in the dust, yea, even they were near to be cast with sorrow into a watery grave. Now, the reason why I love that it says to be carried out of this time to meet their God, and not this world or this life or something like that. Out of this time, because if you've read Ecclesiastes, you know that the time is only measured unto men. There's time set under the heavens, but God is separate. He's outside of our whole concept of time or something. Time is only measured unto man. And so the fact that they were carried out of time to meet their God is just a really beautifully interesting way of conveying the that concept of death and life and death and things that is just beautiful. And it's a little pearl or gem there that I haven't ever noticed before. And Jacob and Joseph also being young, having need of much nourishment. I assume, so there's a chance there that they might have been breastfeeding still, or at least they were young enough, like toddler age or something, that they needed to be with their parents and stuff, like, and be looked after by their parents. And again, I don't know how young that is. It could have been any time. It could have been under 10 or something, but they were still. I would assume that they're probably under 5 at this point, maybe. But were grieved because of the afflictions of their mother, and also my wife with her tears and prayers, and also my children did not soften the hearts of my brethren that they would loose me. So none of those, like, this is how stubborn they had been for those several days. And there was nothing save it with the power of God, which threatened them with destruction, could soften their hearts. That's a really other interesting, beautiful point. Other people seem to say, like, well, why is, like, God of the Old Testament especially, and like a lot in the Book of Mormon as well, like so fire and brimstony and like continually like threatening us with speaking harshly against the wicked or against wrongdoing and stuff. It's because like there are people who need that threat of destruction. There are people who need the threat of destruction to keep them in line. And I think to some extent in modern days, I don't think that's necessarily the it might be, I might be totally wrong again. I'm not God, so I don't understand His ways. But I think there's definitely some people who need to hear that, and there's some people who don't. And that's one of the reasons why the gospel is so multifaceted and stuff. Like you can talk, like you can focus on the amazing stuff that Christ taught and stuff, where you can focus on the potential like righteous and wicked justice of God, fire and brimstone, dividing sword sort of stuff as well. And it's important, I think, to have understanding of both of those. And we're each designed differently, so we each kind of dwell, I think, differently on things that we need at different times in our lives. So nothing but the power of God threatening them with destruction could soften their hearts, because they were hard-hearted. Wherefore, when they saw that they were about to be swallowed up in the depths of the sea, they repented of the thing which they had done, insomuch they loosed me. And it came to pass that after they had loosed me, behold, I took the compass, and it did work whether I desired it. And it came to pass that I prayed unto the Lord, and after I had prayed, the winds did cease, and the storm did cease, and there was a great calm. And it came to pass that I, Nephi, did guide the ship, and that we sailed again towards the promised land. And it came to pass that after we had sailed for the space of many days, we did arrive at that promised land, and we went forth. So again, many days before the storm, many days afterwards. We don't know exactly when in there. I don't know if it's exactly kind of sort of halfway on the trip, or whether it might have been like going through like the Caribbean, Bermuda Triangle, like with hurricanes or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know enough about that, but it's really fascinating and interesting to think about some of that stuff. But Nephi guided the ship and sailed them again towards the promised land. After the space of many days we arrived at the promised land, and we went forth upon the land and did pitch our tents, and we did call it the promised land. And it came to pass that we did begin to till the earth, and we began to plant seeds. We did put all our seeds into the earth, which we had brought from the land of Jerusalem. That's important. Okay, that's a really good point. So if we go back to our map that we had there, they brought, like, we're not looking for something super tropical, like almost equatorial, like this part in Oman. We're looking for Jerusalem, the seeds that they brought all the way from Jerusalem, the stuff that they had in Jerusalem at the time, which means this is perfectly on tropic with that. And I think, and so they say the opposite of the equator, I think from there is here, and that's where they say at the Tropic of Capricorn. That's where I believe they say. Some of the Mesoamerican theorists say that Lehi came all the way around and landed right here, and then somehow they traveled up and it all just took place here. Whereas I'm pretty sure it happens in this area right here. But again, we don't know for sure, but you can look into the evidences yourself. And it came to pass after we sailed for the space of many days, we got that, and they planted their seeds in the earth, they brought from the land of Jerusalem, and it came to pass that they did grow exceedingly, wherefore we were blessed in abundance. And it came to pass we did find upon the land of promise, as we journeyed in the wilderness, that there were beasts in the forests of every kind, both the cow and the ox, and the ass and the horse, and the goat and the wild goat, and all manner of wild animals, which were for the use of men. And we did find all manner of ore, both of gold and of silver and of copper. And that's kind of where the chapter leaves it. And I think our chapter tomorrow probably continues straight on. It goes on from ore or something. That's kind of a point there. But this is, like, you could stop it right here, I think, which is for men, and stop it there, and then throw that on. I don't know. But again, it's really, I think, best. It's good at some point in your life when you're reading studying the Book of Mormon to go through and read it as a whole narrative. When I was in the States about almost 8 years ago now, there was a book I picked up, a couple copies of actually, called Mormon's Book, and it was the entire text of the Book of Mormon, but it had been formatted like a modern day sort of young adult novel. So it was all the original text and stuff, but instead of being divided into sort of chapters and verses and lines and footnotes and things like that, it was all the text was as if you're reading a good novel, to make it flowed, I guess, better. And all the quotes where they quote other scriptures and stuff and quote things were done like verse quotes in the middle, like in a center column sort of thing, and it italicized and things. And it was I think a really powerful, effective sort of way of reading through the Book of Mormon. Anyway, so that's what's how we had the journey. They made it to the promised land safely, and again, there's so much of the promise in the Book of Mormon that is tied to the land, that is the land of freedom, and that people on it shall worship God or be destroyed. And it is a record of a fallen people. We see the record of the fall of three peoples who independently were led to the promised land and then destroyed because they turned away from God. And it's written for our day, and it was specifically found, and the church was founded in the U.S. because that is the promised land. It was the land founded in liberty and freedom and something. And I guess myself as an Australian, how do I feel about that? I don't have any problem with that, really. Like, I think growing up, if you feed into like sort of media, some ways, or the attitudes of I think left-wing thought, you have a lot of anti-Americanism in the rest of the world. But I think the more I've grown and looked into things myself, it's inconsistent for me that this land that has been established under God for religious freedoms and liberties and individual liberties and things that has flourished and has been such an amazing, huge influence, powerful influence in the rest of the world, that the Book of Mormon could have happened in Guatemala or Ecuador or South America or something like that. Anyway, like those lands are not abundant the way they're not, and despite like booming Christianity there in a lot of those nations, I don't think, from what I understand of, and again, there might be certain South American cultures or things that are different, but even with Catholicism or Christianity booming down there in different countries, you still don't have anywhere near this sort of prosperity and freedom that is inseparably connected to the promise of the land that we see in the Book of Mormon. Like, I live in a pretty free country. Like, Australia's pretty great country for a lot of reasons. And I do think, by and large, we are healthier and have better quality food and things here than in America. And there's a number of reasons, and I'm really grateful that we don't have guns to some extent, because there haven't been mass shootings and things. But then I also see the need for why it's important, because with changing cultural standards and things, and bigger government and things that we're seeing, like, it's very much like I'm not going to say I don't have a fear that at some point the government is like going to try and enforce at gunpoint some sort of standard that is completely contrary to the standards of God, and that's and yeah, and I don't have the free that we don't have in Australia, even though like there's people who argue for free speech and by and large culturally there's mostly for the most part an attitude of free speech. We don't have free speech law. We don't have a concept of free speech. We don't have it written into our government the way that it is in America. Um, and as like global standards and cultural standards change and stuff, especially in this country, I'm really concerned that even expressing religious values as the countries get like this isn't a country founded on God. Like there was a verse in the Australian national anthem, I think, that mentioned God. There was one of the verses that were taken out before it was made the national anthem. Only 2 verses out of like a dozen survived or something like that. Several of them talked about Captain Cook being glorious and killing Aboriginals and stuff like that. But the one of the verses, I think it was the 3rd verse or something specifically, that mentioned God being led by God to this land or something, completely taken out. And for the most part, Australia is almost entirely desert. It's not nearly as abundant or fertile as the promised land that is the United States. So I am perfectly. There's no sort of inherent contradiction to me that's the promised land. I don't feel like hard done by or worse off for not being born in the promised land. I don't. I feel quite grateful that I was born here and not in like a 3rd world country, because I think it's given me opportunities to learn and understand about things and have this sort of outside perspective of America and see it, see both sort of the good and the bad that is there to be learned from. And yeah, and now I'm just sort of ranting, but anyway, if you stuck it out this far, good on you. Thank you for watching today. And remember to share your favorite thoughts from the chapter or anything we talked about today. And yeah, I guess I'm just having a stupor of thought or something. But either way, America is the promised land, and that's where I do believe that the second coming of Christ will appear in the east, fly like be seen of the whole earth, and I do think he will come to America to establish his righteous reign of peace over the whole earth. Anyway, I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you for watching, and tomorrow is a public holiday in Australia. It's actually Australia Day. Although I think there's been a number of leftist movements trying to rename it Invasion Day or change it to May 8th or something like that, so, and other days and things like that. Blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so I'm not going to be releasing a video tomorrow, but I'll be back next week with the next chapter. Thank you for watching. All the best, and have a good one.